Good afternoon. This is Eric Brotman from BFG Financial Advisors. I'm here with Linda Burton from DRW, and we're excited to present Exploring the Five Facets of Well-Being, a journey towards professional growth. And for those of you who know me, you know if it's not fun, I don't do it. So this will be both educational and entertaining today. We're going to have some fun. Just so you all know, in the chat box, if you have any questions, you can interrupt us anytime during the presentation. Hannah Dennis is behind the scenes, and she'll be collecting those chat questions, and we're happy to be interrupted anytime. And without further ado, Linda, why don't I let you introduce yourself?
Well, thank you, Eric. Linda Rosack Burton. I am home base. World headquarters is Ellicott City, Maryland, right in between DC and Baltimore. I'm an executive coach, and I'm also a well-being coach, very grounded in research and evidence-based practices. But I promise I won't get too much into the science today. If I do, Eric is going to remind me that I need to cut it off. And I'm here because it's always fun to be with Eric. I was just thinking, how long have we known each other? 10, 15 years? You were much
Oh,
older than
more than
me.
that. No, no, yes, I'm far your senior. No, it's been north of 20 years, Linda.
Wow. Well, and that goes
Yeah,
to show you good relationships are worth staying in touch with. So I'm
agreed.
excited to
And
be here today.
well, glad to have you. And for those of you who don't know me, BFG Financial Advisors, our headquarters are here in Lutherville, Maryland, not too far from Linda in Ellicott City. We do financial planning and wealth management for families all across the U.S., and we deal with a lot of the qualitative portions of financial planning and family planning, not just the quantitative. I'm not a math wonk, I promise. So, Linda, why don't you start us off? We're going to talk about 5 different facets of well-being today. We're going to dive into each one as we go, but I know you have some. I know you have a couple of takeaways that we want to start with.
Yeah, thank you. Some elements to really ground what we're going to be talking about today, because all of these facets, this holistic approach to well-being, is all interconnected. So the first element would be self-awareness. Are we beating ourselves up because of our well-being? Are we coming to our well-being with deficit thinking or scarcity thinking? Or are we connecting with who we are, what's important, and what agency we have over the directions that we choose for ourselves? The second one is environmental stability, right? Simply saying, does our environment support our well being or not? And if it doesn't, then when we embark on a plan to increase or improve our well being, that we take into consideration what the environment is and what we need from our environment. The third is fundamental beliefs, which is very much related to number one. But our fundamental beliefs is, can we grow? Can we improve? Can we enhance our well being? Rather than having self limiting beliefs that impair our progress or inhibit what we want to move ahead on. And the fourth is what we think is the highest level of engagement with our well-being, and that is when we have something outside of ourselves, something greater than ourselves. So if any of you saw my email, you saw that the pre-program reflection was, what purpose does your well-being serve? Well, we know self-care is what it serves, but what purpose does it serve outside of ourselves? So those are kind of the grounding, the self-awareness, the fundamental beliefs, the environmental stability, and then the overall common chord of greater than something bigger than ourselves.
So I'm
How's
going to
that
make a
sound?
suggestion. I'm going to make a suggestion to everybody watching today, whether you're watching live on April 29th or whether you're watching this recorded later. It's very tough to work on 5 aspects of anything at the same time. So if you hear an idea today on any of these 5 things, grab one. Try to make a material improvement in your own well-being in one of these 5 areas, whichever one, whether it's the one that you feel you're weakest at and you want to make some improvements, or whether it's one of your strong zones and you just want to continue to hone those skills. Pick one thing, because you're going to hear a lot of different suggestions and ideas today. Don't try and do it all at once. This is a crawl before you sprint type exercise. We are going to talk about 5 different areas that are on your screen. We are going to talk about the physical well-being. We're going to talk about psychological well-being. We're going to talk about financial well-being. which is what most people think when they think of me, is the financial side. But I assure you, the physical and psychological sides are things I'm going to self-deprecate a little today, and Linda looks forward to that. We're going to talk about social well-being and then, of course, personal well-being. And Linda, why don't we jump right in and we'll let you get started on the first one, which is
Yeah,
physical well-being. That is not, in fact, a picture of me and Linda.
nor I. So physical well-being, it is maintaining a healthy body, and we primarily do that through nutrition, exercise, and sleep. Does anybody remember the last time you had a really good night's sleep? Sleep deprivation is huge in our culture. And I once had a friend that said, when I have a good night's sleep, the whole world looks better in the morning. And so what are the benefits of sleeping? If you want to add that to the chat box, when you have a good night's sleep, what are the benefits that you achieve out of that? And what about our relationship with exercise? Is it a love-hate relationship? My relationship is thousands of dollars that I have lost on gym memberships without the return on investment. So when we think about exercise, what is that awareness that we have over how we are looking at our own physical health? And then what's our relationship with food? Is it comfort? Mm. Is it reward? Well, jewelry is a pretty good reward for me as well. But what about the ability to savor the food that we have, to really enjoy that? So here's a tip. Eric is exactly right. You cannot take everything here and say, I'm going to improve my overall well-being. Well, that works as good as New Year's resolutions, right? By the end of January, we're done. So it is to pick one area, whether you're doing well in it or you want to do even better. So this is from Atomic Habits. What would 1% improvement look like in nutrition, in exercise, in sleep? If you're looking at the physical entity, 1% improvement daily. So think about the compound interest, right? Over a year, you have over 37% improvement in what you are looking to get better at, grow in, develop from. And with that comes a higher level of productivity, greater knowledge about your physical well-being, and really it kind of puts that whole self-awareness package together. So I don't know if anybody has any ideas. You can put it into the chat, but what might be one area that you want to commit to? And if you cannot come up with an idea, what's that 1% improvement? And
Love
and
that.
you know what? If you miss a day, well, it's a mulligan. What's a mulligan? Is it a mulligan in golf?
Mulligan. It is a
Do
mulligan.
it over. Do it the next day. And you know, if there's this voice in your head saying, "Oh gosh, I didn't do," don't beat ourselves up. That's the most important thing.
You know, we've been doing do-overs since we were on the playground as kindergartners, and there was any close call at first base, we're like, just do over. Like, yeah, that was a good
Yeah.
way to solve things. So first of all, I had a really good night's sleep last night. Since you asked, and since this is therapy for me as well, I sleep great at night, and I didn't for years. And for me, actually, a sleep study made a huge difference, and I realized there were things that I could do to sleep better. And now I sleep. I slip into a small coma every night. It's great. I sleep great. I wake up rested. And part of that is part of my own physical well-being. I also exercise a lot, but not by myself. I have a trainer. I have a yogi. It's true. That is, in fact, me. No, it's not. But I have a trainer because I need an accountability partner. Linda, I know there's people listening who are thinking, I know how to do this, but if I don't have somebody saying drop and give me 20, I might not. And so by having an appointment with a trainer, and you said you spend thousands of dollars on health club membership did not help me because I didn't go. But if I had an appointment, I would always show up. And so I
Yeah.
do have a trainer who I think is terrific. I do have a yogi who I think is terrific. I do sessions a couple times a week, and I love that. My physical well-being challenge is around nutrition because I
Mm.
have what playfully gets called a seafood diet, where you see food and you in fact eat it. I don't have a healthy relationship with food. I love to eat. I don't have a sweet tooth, but I eat too fast. I'm not
Mm.
mindful. You talked about savoring. I
Yeah.
definitely don't do that all the time. So my physical well-being is I try to do self-care, And some of that is massage or other types
Yeah.
of stretching or other types of things
Yeah.
that can help with self-care. Some of it is, from a physical standpoint, it's just walking. We all have step counters on our wrists now. So our
Mhm.
office is doing a challenge in May to see
Love it.
which of our various departments, which of us get the most average steps. And I was not going to participate and I was guilted into it. So now I have to try and win because I'm competitive that way. So physical well-being for me, if I were to pick one of these areas, sleep, I feel like I've conquered the sleep thing.
Nice.
And biorhythms are important. Going to bed at the same time every night, getting up at the same time every morning is supposedly healthy. That I know is really hard. If you have kids, if you have a business, if you travel, that's really tough.
Right.
But for me, it's about nutrition, and that is something I can commit to. So thank you. Again, anything in the chat box, if there's questions about this, no, neither Linda nor I will be demonstrating downward dog on this particular Zoom, but another time. So, so now that you've got that mental image and you can't get rid of it, let's talk about psychological well-being, which comes back to self-care as well. And once again, I'll defer to you to get started.
Yeah, thank you. Well, so we think mental health and emotional health go hand in hand, right? Psychological. So when we think of mental health, we want to look at things as like, how are we making sound decisions? Do we have good problem solving skills? How's our rational thinking? How are we handling conflict? How are we handling the ups and downs of life on a regular basis? Because every day we could become more upregulated, as we say. And so that's the mental health that we're looking at. The emotional health is, do I have coping skills for my anxiety? How well am I managing stress? What about the ability to regulate our moods? I talk about this mood elevator that we're on. When we wake up in the morning, where are we? Are we on the basement floors of frustration, anger, or are we right first floor, kind of neutral? Or are we moving all the way up? I think on the top floor, it's not lingerie, it's not men's wear, it is gratitude. So where are we on a daily basis on our mood elevator? And then how do we regulate our emotions? So we all have negative emotions. We don't suppress them because they only get larger when we do suppress them. And this is where the environment stability comes in, right? So Susan David talks about negative emotions, treating them as data. Don't attach a story to it. So the story is, I'm not smart enough, I'm never going to get that promotion, right? So looking at the data, I'm feeling insecure or I'm feeling very frustrated. But what is it about the situation or the circumstance that makes us feel that way instead of that story that we probably have said to ourselves many, many times before that just keeps us going in the downward spiral? That is one way to kind of regulate the emotions in a more healthy way. And then to really understand that how we process that emotion is an indicator of how well we are handling. I had one client, Eric, that listed all the things in her psychological well-being that she felt she was doing very well. To your point at the beginning of the program, it may be that you're doing really well in an area, but you want to bump it up a notch. And so
Mhm.
recognizing, hey, I do have some really good coping skills, but maybe I need to be better in how I respond to conflict, something like that. How's that sound?
It sounds like a plan to me. I will tell you that when I think of psychological well-being, I usually think of stress levels, cortisol. I think
Yep.
of are we feeling under the gun? Are we feeling pressured? You talked about, do you wake up in that high state of gratitude or do you wake up sort of in the dumps? I think there's also a sense, people report when they don't like their job. They report that Sunday night they start to feel almost
Yeah.
sick. That's a very sad way to go through life, actually. And it does scream for finding something else to do by day, I think. But the stress level, the cortisol levels are important. How you deal with them are important. Think of the stressors that we're under at all times today that
Yeah.
didn't exist 30 years ago. For those
Right.
of us old enough to remember when we didn't have a phone attached to our hips that was pinging and bonging at us all day long, um, remember the E-myth? Email was going to transform work. We were only going to have to work 4 hours a week because of email. And now you can spend 4 hours a day answering emails. So it really, I think it comes down to how we balance stress.
Right.
I created something for the consulting clients that we work with that I refer to as the joy revenue matrix. And I try and balance the things that make us more successful and the things that bring us joy and put it into 4 quadrants. And so for people who've gone through that exercise, and it's a professional exercise, not a personal one, but psychologically on the professional front, it allows you to spend most of your time doing things that bring you joy, whether they make you money or not. You want to carve out time for things that bring you joy, whether they make you money or not. But then also to try and figure out, what do we do with the things that don't bring us joy? The parts of the job, some of them you can't get rid of. They're reality. Some of them you can delegate to somebody who loves to do something you don't love to do. And some of them you can just plain get rid of. Some of them you just stop doing. I'm not
Hmm.
suggesting you go out and get fired if that's part of your job responsibility. I am saying that if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a business owner, if you're self-employed in any way, or if you have some control over the way you spend your days, spending as much of it in that joy zone creates much better relationship with work. I would say the same thing is true at home, although it's a different exercise, but psychologically, is home a respite? A lot of people who work at home report that they have challenges because they feel like
Right.
they never leave work. And so having a specific area in the house physically where you punch the clock, you punch into work, maybe you get dressed for work and go to that room, and that's what you do. The other thing you talked about, I think, relates to mindfulness. And we haven't talked
Hmm.
about this. And I remember doing at one point um, during the 0809 recession, a group of 30 or so financial advisors were invited up to the Berkshire Mountains to do a yoga and meditative retreat. It was at a Buddhist resort. It was not a religious event. Resort's probably the wrong word. A Buddhist retreat center, I guess. I don't know if Buddhists do resorting, but nonetheless, it was not a religious event, but it was a deeply spiritual and amazing thing. And for 4 days, we quieted our minds during a really stressful time for us
Mm.
professionally. What I can tell you is it took 3 days for me even to decompress to the point where I could relax at that moment.
Wow.
And I came home a different human, and it didn't last. See, a lot of
Mm.
times, people say, "Oh, I really need a vacation," and they take that vacation, but then, their flight's delayed on the way home, and by the time they get home, they're already stressed about work the next day. I think putting meditation or putting some kind of quieting the mind into your daily routine is probably really helpful.
100%.
Um, I have a mixed bag with it. I think professionally, I'm doing an awesome job, and I think personally, quieting the mind and eliminating some of the noise in my personal is a little harder for me. But
Yeah.
again, put something in the chat box if you'd like. I'm going to move on to the next topic, and Linda, I'm gonna take first shot at this one because
Yeah.
it's my bailiwick. If you look at all those half dollars, financial well-being is something a lot of folks don't have access to. Financial wellness programs are not common. It's something that at BFG we've started doing for companies, for nonprofits, meeting with employees. Employers are happy to help their employees find financial wellness, and there's a couple reasons for that. One is I liken money to oxygen. If you have enough, you don't think about it. And if you
Mm.
don't have enough, that's all you're thinking about. So if you have employees who are worried about sending their kid to school or paying for a medical bill or paying their rent the next month or whatever it is, or a car needs to get fixed or whatever it is, if they're worried about money, they're not thinking about work.
Mm.
In fact, when they're home, if they're worried about money, they're not thinking about their relationship with their spouse or children or other loved ones. And so it's really important to develop some wellness around financials. I also know that when people retire, and I don't love the word retire. I wrote a book called Don't Retire, Graduate for a reason, and it's because retirement sounds awful and no one should do it. And what I mean by that is you don't go from 50 or 60 hours a week to daytime TV and shuffleboard and still thrive. You just don't. You need a purpose. But I discovered over my 30 plus years doing this that there are 3 secrets to the happiest retirees. And I think the financial well-being and the personal well-being become hand in hand with these 3 things. And I'll share them. One is that they're debt free. And I know there's good debt and there's bad debt, and a mortgage or a business loan are different than, say, credit card bills. All true. But there's something about being retired or being at that stage of your life and not owing anybody anything. It's
Mm.
a big deal. The second is that they're healthy. So, we talked about physical well-being. If you don't have your health, I don't care how much money you have, you're not going to be a happy human. It's really, really tough. And so you can't just decide one day you're going to be healthy after a lifetime of not doing that and expect overnight success. You talked about the 1%. It is much easier to stay healthy than to get healthy. I would argue it's much easier to stay wealthy than to get wealthy in the same regard. So if you've taken care of yourself in all the different well-being areas and you're debt free, the third is you have a purpose. You have a reason to get out of bed every morning, something that drives you, something that gets you excited for your day. It can be for money if you feel like it. It can be volunteering. It can be family. It can be travel. It can be a lot of things. But I would argue a bucket list is not enough, because a bucket list is individual, check the box and move on. And this needs to be a lifestyle. I'll say one more thing about this, and then I'll let you take a stab at all the stuff I missed, because no doubt I've missed a few things. And that is that the relationship, the conversations that we have about money and about finance, it's so taboo. And I have so many examples of this where families don't communicate and loved ones don't communicate, and there's such a heaviness in the room around this, and people don't feel comfortable talking about it. And if you don't have someone to talk to, like anything else, this can fester and become a real issue. So I think retirement to me is not the absence of work; it's the absence of needing to work. And part of your financial well-being is being financially independent to the point that you're spending your days doing things, ideally, that bring you joy, at least most of the time. So I'll leave it at that and see if you've got more to add on the financial side.
Well, I actually love everything that you said, Eric, because it's a mindset, just like with mental health or emotional health. Right? Sometimes there's this taboo,
Oh, yeah.
and we don't want to talk about it because of whatever messages we're sending ourselves. So I think putting that wellness emphasis on it is a way to start lowering the defenses that we have, or the uncomfortable feelings that we have, and really being able to say, I, I need help, right? Whether in any of these areas of well-being, if we're
Hmm.
stuck, it's okay to ask for help. There's a saying that says asking for help is not about giving up, it's about refusing to give up.
Mm.
And so it's a healthy thing to ask. If there's also a practice that came to mind when I was listening to you, and that is, what if our best friend had the same situation that we're facing, whether it's the financial situation or a health situation? What would we advise them? Because when we take ourselves out of it, if we're helping someone, then we're really able to kind of get to thinking, getting out of our own way, if you will, and get to thinking about, yeah, what would that advice look like if I wanted to help a very special person in my life? Yeah.
It it's really hard to be dispassionate about your own affairs.
Yeah.
Very hard. Financial advisors should have financial advisors, and we do. I have my wife and I meet with a different financial advisor from our organization, and I take off my planner hat, put on my husband and father hat, and look at it in a very different way, because I don't want it to feel like I'm the one telling her
Yep.
what we need to be doing. I want us to be talking about what we need to do and having a healthy conversation and a healthy relationship around money. It's loaded territory. People
Yeah.
just they don't talk about it, and you hear so many stories of lottery winners who suddenly have more money than they'll ever know what to do with, and they become reclusive, or they wind up bankrupt, or just
Right.
terrible things happen because they're ill prepared for it. I consider what we do as financial advisors to be a little bit like trainers in the gym. Nothing we do is neuroscience. Absolutely none of this is performing surgery. It's all things people could do for themselves, but they either have a blind spot, or they don't want to think about it, or they're too busy, or for whatever reason, it's not how they want to spend their time. And we become an accountability partner. And I think
Hmm.
any of these areas of well-being, whether it's the trainer in the gym, whether it's
Hmm.
a therapist or a coach or a consultant or somebody for some of the other things, I think having accountability partners makes a
I
huge
agree.
difference, don't you?
100%. 100%. I actually had to have an accountability partner when I was walking 2 miles a day, 5 days a week, but probably more like 7 days a week. And I lost that routine. And the only way I could get it back was to have an accountability partner. And
Hmm.
sometimes that partner walked with me or was with me on the phone, but sometimes it was just on our phone. We were connected to our each other's activity. And I knew that I had to put that 2 mile activity on my watch so that they saw my two. So that accountability is really, really important. And I also thought about what you said earlier about cortisol, because I believe when we are in some financial straits, that cortisol level is with us constantly. That cortisol is a chemical that's in our bloodstream for about 24 to 26 hours. So if we were stressed about our finances yesterday, guess what? The cortisol is still going through our bloodstream. And if we have to pay a bill or if we have to draw whatever, that's more cortisol. And over the long term, that really hurts our cardiovascular health. So mindfulness, looking for ways to decrease that cortisol and infuse more what we call dopamine and serotonin, those really good neurochemicals. That's really how we can offset that increase of cortisol. And those who know me know that I research gratitude. I've been doing it for 10 years. We actually know that when we practice gratitude, we can decrease the level of cortisol by 23% in our body. So, and what was that joy matrix again? Because I love that.
Yeah, no, it's four quadrants. One axis is joy, and one is either revenue or success, however you define it. And so you have a box that's high both, and a box that's low both, and a box that's high one and low the other,
Yeah.
and so forth. And it allows you to sort of rate the things that you do based on how happy they make you,
Mm,
and also rate the things that you do based on how much either revenue or success or money they bring you in some quantifiable way,
mm.
and then determine these are the things that I should be spending most of my time on. And
I
it's
love that
allowed me to
visual.
it's allowed me to completely recreate my career. I mean, I really
Really?
went through and changed my entire career around that. And to the best of my knowledge, I came up with it on my own, although I'm sure somebody out there would go, no, no, I had it first look. But as simple as it is, it was an exercise that I listed everything. And then I found people who really, truly, in our organization, who truly loved doing the things that helped make us more successful that I didn't love doing. And I brought them more joy by taking stuff that wasn't making me happy off my plate. That's
Right.
unbelievable. It was so
Wow.
simple. And
Woo.
and and if you have a transparent relationship with your coworkers or your department or whatever, you can have these conversations. And it's not that everything is unicorns and spit bubbles. Work is still work. There's stuff we do that we don't maybe want to do or love to do. But how do we tip the scales in favor of spending most of our workday doing things that at least fill our tank rather than emptying it? And it means that you don't have to be on empty when 5 o'clock hits or whatever, and you're on your way home and you're showing up to the people you love the most potentially with an empty tank. I mean, how
It-
you show up at home matters, and how you show up at work matters, and all of those things play a role.
and you want to be congruent in both. And so, yeah, so you're also filling up someone else's tank, which is a great segue into social well-being, if we can go
It
there.
is, it is, and somebody gave me control over the slides, so I hadn't gone there yet. So let's talk about social
Hint,
well-being.
hint, hint. Social,
Yeah, you're
so
you're
social
as
well-being is simply how
you're
we
as subtle
connect.
as a sledgehammer, by the way. As subtle as all right. Go ahead.
Social well-being, how
Yeah.
we connect and interact with each other, with people in our community, with the people that we work with. And so this is a time to pause and think about who are the people in our lives that have a positive influence on our well-being. How do we spend more time with them, or how do we maximize maybe this short amount of time that we have with them, but to make it really rich and fulfilling to both of us? So think of the people that you have fun with, Eric, that are loving, that are respectful, that just show kindness and compassion to you. And to also think of social well-being as it's tied to social contribution. So Adam Grant, who many people know about, he was talking recently about contribution journaling. So the question is, how do we contribute to other people's well-being? And you just gave a great example of that, Eric, by taking things off of your plate, but that can be fulfilling to others, right? Is a way of contributing to their well-being. And so the here's how you do the contribution journaling. If you're a journaler, if you're not, just on your whiteboard or whatever. So how have you been useful to someone in a given day? What three ways? And why that's so motivating is that we remind ourselves that we really can make a contribution. Maybe it's this big, maybe it's this big, but we can make a contribution. We can make a difference in somebody's life that maybe we just thought I can help them with this because they really kind of look like they're under stress or they're running short. And that just motivates us to do more. And that's that connection with something greater than ourselves, that we are contributing to others' well-being. So I think it's really important. It goes back to our fundamental belief, right? That we can grow, we can improve our own well-being, and what a beautiful association with contributing to other well-being as well. What do you think
You
of
know,
that?
I've heard it said, I agree with you entirely. I've heard it said that the older you get, the more you need the friends you knew when you were young,
Mm.
which is
Ooh.
sort of a really interesting way to put it. And, being that my 35th high school reunion is this weekend, and I'm looking forward to seeing 20 or so of the folks who I had formative years with, and I'm
Ooh.
thoroughly looking forward to that. The older we get, the more that means, I think, to a lot of us. And it doesn't have to be your high school. Some people had disastrous high school experiences, but whatever it is, whether it's the neighborhood or whether it's high school or whether it's college or whether it's early in your career, the people who sort of knew you when you were becoming you, which really does, it is a process, and we're still sort of evolving in that way. I want to take a different approach to social well-being, and we now have this thing called social media. Social
Mhm.
media is probably the single biggest contributor to stress and the lack of well-being I can come up with. And actually, I've taken social media breaks before where I'll just take Facebook and such off my phone and not have access to it for a week or a month or whatever. It's actually wonderful. And if I didn't use it professionally, I'd probably get rid of it entirely. However, I did an exercise over the last year or two on a couple of the sites. First of all, I got rid of ones I don't use frequently.
Okay.
Secondly, I went through LinkedIn because I thought, well, LinkedIn is a great way to connect with people professionally. You have your friends and your circles of friends and family, but this is a great way to connect with people professionally. And I looked at my LinkedIn and I had an absurd number of people on there who I either barely knew or didn't know at all, because
Mm.
over the years it just accepts it. So I went through and I put a filter on it. I essentially pruned my bonsai. And by doing that, I said, if this is somebody I wouldn't email tomorrow or want to see or sit down with or have coffee with, I'm not keeping them in my
Yeah.
profile.
Great
So
criteria.
I wound up deleting almost 5,000 people. It took a
Wow.
really long time. And if you were one of the people deleted and you're on this call, I'm sorry, I haven't seen you in a while. But I then started re-engaging with the people who were in that and have
Right.
re-engaged with folks. And it's been so rewarding to now see a feed of people I actually do want to talk to and hear about and celebrate and congratulate on their accomplishments. And
Mm.
so I did the same thing with Facebook on the personal side. And I said, if this is
Mm.
somebody I wouldn't pick up the phone and call, why are we connected here? Why do we need to especially when there's so much political noise and so much ugly going on social media? If you're not filling my tank, let's not do this anymore. I would never. You wouldn't sit at a cafe and do that with somebody you hardly knew. Why are you doing it online?
Mm.
And so some of my social well-being, in addition to staying connected with friends who I've had for many years and family and loved ones, has been filtering really thoughtfully the folks whose content is being submitted to
Mm.
me. And it has made a huge difference. Facebook is no longer a place to go and raise my cortisol. Now it's a place to go and see people I maybe haven't seen in a while, or reach out and wish somebody a happy birthday. So
Awesome.
social well-being is it's changing over the years. These people aren't necessarily friends; they're connections. The word friend
Right.
is so loaded. If we're blessed to have half a dozen really good friends in our lives,
Mhm.
we've lived. So
Mhm.
these are acquaintances, and understanding the connectivity. The Kevin Bacon 2 degrees of separation thing. It's good
Yeah.
to know that somebody knows the answer to something you need. Great, but be thoughtful about what social media is doing to us. And frankly, I got a teenager.
Yeah.
I swear it is the hardest thing to navigate for parents of anything I've ever
Mm.
seen, because you cannot control it. It is a nine-headed hydra, unfortunately it can suck you right in. And so these kids really have something that we didn't
Yeah.
have to deal with.
Yeah. No, I'm so glad you brought that up because I think a lot of the stress that I see is the isolation that people feel. We felt it certainly during the pandemic, but it's continued. And I do believe social media contributes greatly to that feeling of isolation. Um, be, that's and for the young individuals, such as your daughter and many others, that is their social connection, and
Yeah.
it's very powerful, very harmful. So I love how you took control of how you are defining these social media platforms, how they serve you well, and where you have a significant connection. Because isn't that about what's important? Who are those
Yes.
people in our lives that contribute to our well-being? And this isn't so when we talk about isolation, what one idea that filters through my mind is, what does an extreme introvert think when we're talking about how you spend more time? And so it really is in a measured approach, right? If we're an extrovert, then we'll find that time easily to call, text, get together for coffee. But if we're an introvert, we need to be able to recognize some interaction is important, but it's got to be in a metered approach where you don't end up feeling exhausted or
Yep.
completely de-energized, but that it works for you rather than against you, because that isolation, it just allows so many other things to come into our way of thinking, and we don't have anybody that's going to challenge us in how we're
Hmm.
thinking, right? Which I love. I work with a coach as well, just like you work with a financial planner. Challenge me on my thinking and let me explore other perspectives that
Hmm.
I'm stuck in my own orbit, and it's very helpful to get outside of that. So you really took great control of that. I love it, Eric.
Well, it took some time. It was thoughtful. I will say that we have never been more connected as a society, and we've also never been lonelier. And
Mm-hmm.
the conundrum there, that is so mind blowing to me, that you can literally pick up a phone and see what your friend is doing in Singapore tonight,
Yeah.
but you're sitting there and you feel like you're by yourself. Like how
Yeah.
I don't know how it happened, and I certainly the science of it. It became very simple to just sit home in your bunny slippers and text people instead of going out and seeing somebody. Remember, neighborhoods have changed too.
Yeah.
Many years ago, you knew all your neighbors. That was your community. Now it's not your community. Then it became based on hobbies and interests. So you knew people because they were at the same swim club, or they were at the
Mm-hmm.
same. They did ballroom dancing, or they did golf, or whatever it is, whatever your hobbies were. That became your community. And it's so rare as adult people that we get a chance. You talk about social well-being. We never get a chance to be that freshman again.
Mm-hmm.
You walk into the freshman year and everyone's the new kid. So, I take advantage of the cohort learning and cohort groups, whether it was leadership. I did leadership Baltimore County many
Yep.
years ago. I did leadership Maryland,
Yep.
where you show up and you're one of 50 people, and ideally none of you know each other. If you do, it's a small number, and you're all the new kid at the same time. And there's something so incredibly powerful on getting to know people, where it's not about who you knew or what you do, it's about who you are and who you
Mm-hmm.
want to be. And so, I encourage people from a social standpoint. I know introverts are going, "Ugh," but the idea that you can be in a cohort group where you're all very much on equal footing from a clique standpoint. You're not the new 11th grader who's showing up and everybody's already got their friends.
Right,
Yeah, that's
right.
hard. It's hard to change schools and to change. So I think as adult people, it's really good to have those experiences. I actually seek them out because it provides me. It's almost like a. I'm not going to say it's a do-over. We started with that. It's not a do-over, but
Right.
it's
No.
it it's a way to continuously evolve. And women are so much better at evolving than men are. I mean, I don't know why that is, and maybe we're off topic, but women evolve in totally different ways, and men don't. And I just upset half our listeners, I'm sure. But sorry, guys, it's true. They evolve and we don't. Let's go to our fifth type of well-being. On that note, before I get myself in trouble, and let's talk about personal well-being. And this is a very broad. This is a very broad. This is sort of the catch-all. This is everything else. And it's interesting because one of the things we didn't put on here is professional well-being, which is probably something we should have talked about also, because as we spend more hours potentially with our coworkers than we do with our own families, I think that's playing a role. So I'm going to equate personal well-being to your whole person, meaning who you are when you're with your family, who you are when you're by yourself, who you are when you're with your coworkers, or you're at a conference somewhere, or you're doing whatever you're doing. Um, and to me, personal well-being starts with really understanding who you are, and that who you are is not what you do.
Mm,
We equate in this country. It's especially bad in the U.S. In this country, we seem to equate who we are with our day job. And so when someone says, "Oh, tell me about yourself," the first thing somebody goes is, "Oh, I'm an accountant. I'm an architect." No, that's what you do all day. That's not who you are. And if it is who you are, and there's ever a day where you don't do that anymore, either because of retirement or illness or whatever, you just lost your identity. It's not that you
mhm.
just don't have the same activity from 9 to 5 or whatever. It's that your identity was tied up in what you did. So,
Yeah.
I don't want to be, I don't want to be just a financial advisor. I think the day I'm not doing that, I would be lost. I'd rather be a, a husband and a father and a hockey fan and a financial advisor and a traveler and a wine enthusiast, whatever. And I think there's so many more facets to ourselves that personal well-being, I think it comes down to some balance. It also comes
Mhm.
down to knowing ourselves. And I host a podcast every Thursday, and every single guest, I ask the very same question at the end, and I get some really amazing responses. But the question I ask is, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I've asked this of 80 plus year old humans who haven't been asked that since they were 7, and they wanted to be astronauts because why not? Um, so what do you want to be? And not what do you want to do when you grow up? Not, do you want to see the pyramids of Egypt, or do you want to take a cruise? Who do you want to be? What do you want to be?
Mm.
And it is such a hard question. And as I'm trying to define my own next chapter of adulthood, and I am trying to evolve against all my biological abilities, trying to come up with a way to reinvent myself and to always be evolving and moving forward. I think is a really good thing. I think personal well-being comes from some satisfaction, some balance. Um, I think a little bit of clarity and a little less opacity, it could make a difference too in terms of what you're looking forward to.
Yeah. I love that. There's just so much in what you just said. So it it is also, to me, it is our why, right?
Yeah,
Maybe, yeah, it's our why.
yeah,
It's our purpose. We all, what is the purpose if we're not who we are at work? What is the purpose of what we do? I think there's also the higher power that is part of our why, and definitely grounded in values and beliefs and strengths. So I go to ethos, which is the Greek meaning of distinguishing characteristics and guiding values and beliefs of an individual, of a community, of an institution. And when we have that ethos in our personal well-being, then we're able to fulfill our company's mission statements, and we're able to really recognize what our purpose is, or how meaningful our interactions are with each other. So I think it's all that you said, and I think it's how we engage with something bigger than ourselves, which I said at the very beginning of the program. And so the one thing that I would add to this, the tip, the activity, is who are those individuals that are important in our life, and how does our well-being serve them outside of ourselves? What's the purpose of our well-being? And to do that, I just start with a listing the names of those people, and next to each name I write how they benefit from my well-being, all
Hmm.
facets, all right, whole being. How do they benefit? And next to that I write, why is that meaningful? And so then we've taken that relationship and tied it to how we can continue to grow and develop and improve in any areas of this well-being, so that it's our whole self, and really listing how they benefit and why that is meaningful. And that brings us back, I think, to really living a life that is very rewarding, and bringing us a lot of satisfaction, a lot of happiness that can offset, because these issues are going to continue to come towards us every day of our life. And so the more that we focus on what the purpose of our well-being and how that helps others and why that's meaningful, I think that's a way for us to start to quiet that fight, flight, freeze, and tap into what the well, our parasympathetic nervous system, to get technical, but that rest and
There you go.
digest.
You promised
Sorry.
you wouldn't do that.
um, right. So where do we carve out, just move out all that clutter and have that
Mhm.
focus and have that sense of calm and understanding? I think that's, yeah, all of that
Well,
together.
we've talked about lots of different facets of well-being. We didn't talk about specifically professional well-being. We didn't talk about spiritual well-being, which you referenced, and certainly that's an option and something important. I also think when we talked about physical well-being, we talked a lot about sleep, nutrition, and exercise. We didn't talk as much about healthcare. And what's
Mm.
interesting is I think in this country we're focused on sickness, not on health.
Ah,
And you know, we spend an enormous amount of time, energy, and money treating illness, but not being quite as preventative as we could be.
ah,
Um,
bingo.
oh
Yep.
my gosh. And Western medicine has really become maintenance of the sick instead of care to
Yeah.
keep people healthy. And I think as adult people, we are responsible for our own. And that means getting physicals, and it means getting the oil change, so to speak, before you have a breakdown.
Yep.
And if you're not getting that, finding a physician you
Right.
trust and have confidence in to do that. I think we owe it to ourselves to check for things before it's a real major issue, because just about anything you catch early, you're better off. And so some of the
Right.
well-being is just taking care of ourselves, if not for ourselves, then for the people who love us, for our
There
kids
you
or
go.
anybody who, or
Yep.
or even for coworkers or clients or others whom we serve who
Yeah.
rely on us.
Well,
I think
everybody
taking
in
care
our
of
sphere of
ourselves.
influence, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Preventive care. That's absolutely right. That's really, really significant, Eric, because if we don't have our health, right, um, everything stops. And that's what we have to focus on. So, what can we do preventatively? And the other thing that I think maybe we need another show is intellectual well-being. And you reminded me of this when you're talking about your continual learning
Oh
and
yeah.
growing. And so there's an intellectual well-being that nurtures us in many ways, even in these different facets, there's an intellectual component
Yeah.
of it. It can go to the professional as well.
Well, I think learning has to be lifetime. If you think
Mm.
you've gotten your degree and you're 22 and you've learned everything you're going to need for the rest of your life, I have bad news for you. That's not how it works. Um, and it's harder to find. It's harder to find the time. It's harder to dedicate to anything formal. But I like cohort learning. I do. And I'm constantly in school, and I encourage our folks here to constantly be in school, because it is difficult for adults to find ways to do intellectual
Yeah,
improvement.
right.
And did you read the book From Strength to Strength? Are you
Yes,
familiar with that book?
yes.
If there's a homework assignment today, we're going to sell some books for this guy. Go to Amazon and get From Strength to Strength. I couldn't put it down.
I
It's not a
agree.
long book. It's not a complicated book, but it changed the way I felt about so many things, and it allowed me to understand why I've moved as an adult from the intelligence curve to the wisdom
Hmm.
curve,
Mm,
where my highest and greatest value professionally right now is not the cusp of current education that was 30 years ago, but it is the life experiences and the actual life lived and things you've seen and done and navigated. And that's why marrying somebody young and technically sound with somebody who's seen it can become such a valuable partnership. The staying
yep.
sharp is not easy. Staying sharp professionally, staying on the cutting edge, whether you're in medicine or architecture or finance or anything, it is hard to stay on the cutting edge. And you can find people who are there and hire them and work with them.
Yep.
But if they don't have real world experience, they're only as good as their textbooks. And so the
Hmm.
combination of what they're learning and what you've practiced and lived and seen and maybe seen go wrong, it's hard to learn from other people's mistakes. We as humans, we like to screw it up ourselves, and we like to invent new ways to do it. But if you can learn from somebody else's lived experience, I
Right,
think it's a big deal.
right.
So we're running low on time. I really could talk to you all day, although I don't know that people want to watch us all day. There are two resources that we're going to provide here. If you take your phones out, we're going to need you to use your QR codes. The first is a well-being checklist that I will let Linda describe momentarily, and the second is for business owners or folks who have employees, and it's a guide to supporting employees' overall wellness, financial and otherwise. And so, if we go to the next slide. There is the well-being checklist. Linda, you want to talk a little bit about this?
You're right. This is goes back to what you talked about at the very beginning. This is a checklist where we select one area, whether we're doing really good in it and we want to improve, or we feel like, now's a good time to put some attention to it. So select one of these areas that we talked about, and then to think about, well, what's good in that area of well-being right now. Let's first look at our strengths, what is working well, because that informs how we're going to move forward in this area of making improvement. What changes do you need to make? What are you aiming to achieve? Are you going to measure it? What might be some milestones? Who's going to keep you accountable? And specifically as possible. Maybe it's that 1%. Specifically, I'm going to um, practice adding a more nutritional element into my diet for the day, whatever that might be, and put it down on paper, share it with somebody, and be able to make it a tool that you come back to, not to feel bad again if we haven't really hit it the way we wanted to. Let's do a do-over. Let's start over. Maybe the first selection is something that felt is now too onerous. So let's step
Hmm.
back, or something's changed in our environment. Let's take a step back to say, okay, what do I need? What do I really feel that I can be responsible for? And use that checklist. And there's also in the back of the checklist is the definitions of what we talked about today. And then by all means, it's, if we need to ask for help, or we know someone that needs to ask for help, there's some resources on the second page that can help.
Terrific. So,
Um,
last
I'm gonna
chance.
I'm gonna interrupt for one moment. We have one
Oh,
question.
sure,
Can
sure.
Eric, can you talk about the name of the book again? Just
Oh,
so
yes.
I can write it down.
The book is called From Strength to Strength. If you want to put it in the chat box, for the life of me, I can't remember the PhD who wrote it, and shame on me for not quoting the
No, I'm
author
drawing a
properly.
blank
But
too.
it is a fantastic read, a game changing read for adult people, in
Right,
my opinion.
right. Oh,
So, all right.
Oprah, for the Oprah Winfrey lovers, she had him on her show. And I can't remember his name either, but
All
Yeah,
right, Hannah, why don't you Google it while we're sitting here and you can put it in the chat box. It's called From Strength to
perfect,
Strength, and
perfect.
we can make sure everybody knows about that. Here is the next QR code, and this is for 10 ways to support your employees' overall wellness. If you scan this QR code, there's a whole lot of information and ways to consider the folks who work with you or work for you, and ways to support them in not only their financial wellness, but all different aspects of that. And then lastly, if you scan the top one, you get to schedule with me. If you scan the bottom one, you get to schedule with Linda. If you scan them both, we'll see who has the more open calendar. But no, we would love to chat with you if you enjoyed this presentation. If there's ways that we can help you, certainly on our end. If you would like to talk about your financial wellness, the wellness of your coworkers, your family, any of that planning, I would be delighted. I also invite you to check out the podcast, Don't Retire, Graduate. And while you're buying books, there it is, Strength to Strength. While you're buying books, there's also mine. So if you like reading about financial wellness, Don't Retire, Graduate. I'm going to do the shameless plug because it's here. Get a copy of this, and if we're in person, I'll sign it for you. Linda, I know folks can schedule a consult with you as well. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely reach out to me, email me. If my phone number is somewhere on this, I'm happy to take text messages. It's really when you feel that you really are ready to make a move, or you want to bring more of this well-being work into your workplace. Let's talk about it. And a plug, my Gratitude Heals journal, which is part book, part journal, part workbook, is something that you might be able to start for yourself in looking at how you bring the science of gratitude into your well-being, your overall well-being.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I wrote down the word gratitude on the paper in front of me because I wanted to have a takeaway from this also. And my takeaways are twofold. One, nutrition is still an issue for me. And if I did 1% better every day, I'd be better off. But I'm going to need an accountability partner to like slap a fork out of my hand or something. But gratitude I can do. And what gratitude looked like for me, I did this for a long time and I got away from it, was writing a single handwritten thank you note to someone every day, just one.
Yeah.
And I did it for a long time. And it dawns on me that when we go to the mailbox now, it's really about how much garbage we're going to have to throw away. Like none of it's useful. Bills don't come that way. Nobody's reading magazines physically anymore, or not very many. So it's mostly going to the mailbox to get trash we can recycle. But when you get a handwritten card, when you get something personal from somebody, you open it and you look at it, and it realizing the 2-3 minutes that it took for somebody to take pen to paper, that is a lost art. And don't let your handwriting hold you back. None of us can write well anymore. But by all means, I'm gonna go back to that because I actually think, and my first one might be to you, Linda, for your time today because this was awesome.
I
Um,
do that. I have that ritual right now, a thank you note at least 5 people every week.
that's great.
And there is something about handwriting, not an email, right?
Yes, yes.
Not a Word document. We actually are using both sides of our brain when we are writing that note. And so I love that. I'm going to encourage everybody to try to maybe just start with one thank you note a week. And why are you thankful? How did they benefit, or how did you benefit, and why is it meaningful? Is a great prescription for everybody.
All right. Well, as I see it, I think we gave folks about 10 or 20 potential exercises or ideas today. I hope this was meaningful to everybody. I hope you pick one, and I hope it helps you on your own wellness journey. I look forward to speaking with some of you. That would be a pleasure. I know Linda does as well.
Same here.
And Linda, my gratitude is to you. This was so much fun. I knew it would be. And you only slipped into science like once or twice. You did great. You really A minus work at least. So strong job. But thank you all for joining us. Any
Thank you so much.
closing comments?
Just gratitude to you and to Hannah and to everyone that took the time out today. It's very meaningful, and I hope we're all making progress.
Well, thank you all for joining us. Have an incredible rest of your day, and we look forward to speaking with some of you soon. Take care, all. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.